All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Frances Roboselli. I'm your city manager and wanted to welcome you all here. Today is a community workshop and it's a little different. It's a community meeting and it's a little different than a commission workshop in that it's supposed to be interactive. We're here to listen, hear from you. You can ask questions. The mayor will be moderating once we turn it over to the floor, but the intent is staff to listen to the dialogue, hear you. There's no votes tonight, there's no action being taken. It's literally a listening session. I'll be taking notes up here to capture any ideas or things that we should be considering when we bring it back for commission action. As far as FreeBee tonight, that will kick off with FreeBee. The format will be, we'll first do a very brief staff presentation on where we're at in the staff work on the issue. And then we will turn it over to the mayor to facilitate. We just ask that you keep a good decorum, raise your hand. If you would mind telling us whether you're a resident, a business member, concerned, interested party, whatever your base you're coming from would be helpful because we're listening to our constituents. And then for FreeBee, when it comes back to the commission, it comes back as a contract amendment. So we're listening tonight to see what pieces of that we should be changing or not. And for the noise ordinance, it will still come back for a first reading and a second reading. So we're doing this community workshop to formulate essentially a new ordinance to bring back as a first reading. So again, if you're interested in that topic, you'll have 2 more times to come back and guess. So with that, I'm going to kick off the platform with Mandy, who is our interim recreation director, and she's going to talk about FreeBee, and then we'll turn it over to the mayor to help facilitate. We are Zoom and recording. So if someone wanted to be here and missed it, it will be on the website, and we're asking you to use the microphone as well so people can hear you if they're listening on Zoom or going to listen to it later.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Mandy Edmonds, the acting recreation director. So I've got a quick presentation on FreeBee for you tonight. What we're proposing is advertising and non-resident charges. So the proposed fare for non-resident ridership, we're proposing to begin charging a $3 fare per person per trip to non-residents of St. Pete Beach for the use of FreeBee. The projected 2025 ridership was 105,000 passengers, and this is assuming a 10% decrease from 2024 due to the hurricane. 50% of the ridership is estimated to be non-resident. The estimated annual revenue for St. Pete Beach is 146,000 plus. And then upon approval from commission, it will be approximately 30 to 60 days for implementation of this. Please note that the implementation of fares could result in a decrease in non-resident ridership, which is not factored into this revenue estimate. We did recently receive information from FreeBee noting that April ridership was up 12% this year from last year. Pre-registration for resident ridership. Residents utilizing the FreeBee service must pre-register their account at the St. Pete Beach Community Center to avoid any fares. The information in the FreeBee web link portal must match the information provided at the time of the ride. So the resident requirements are going to be the name, address, phone number, email, and 2 proofs of residency, which could be driver's license, utility bill, 2 things that say name and address on it. This will be renewed annually, so you'll have to come back to the community center, or if we do outreach at some of our events, you can re-register at that time. The advertising cost recovery. FreeBee will solicit for advertising based on the direction from commission. So the advertising options are use a database of advertisers specific to our area, use of national brands, or have mixed advertising, both local and national. The national brands obviously are going to bring in more funding options. And then the estimated revenue recovery to the city from advertisement is $30,000 to $72,000 a year. So we've already had some feelers out there, and there is interest in sponsorship, ad sponsorship. Approximately $3,000 for a 3-month advertisement has been committed already if we were to go forward with that option. Commission approval of advertising. Commission will determine the guidelines for advertising, whether we use local, national, or mixture. FreeBee will submit the advertising client for city approval before signing any contracts with the advertiser based on the guidelines outlined by commission. This can take anywhere from 60 to 90 days to begin generating the advertising revenue. So the next steps would be to amend the current contract with FreeBee to include the addition of fares for non-registered, non-resident riders, as well as cost recovery through advertising methods. Implement the advertising immediately without the amendment. The fare integration could take approximately 30 to 45 days, and during that time, the portal will be built out so city staff can start marketing the new fee structure for FreeBee use and begin registering residents at the community center. Open for discussion.
Thank you, Mandy. All right, if you have any questions or comments regarding the FreeBee, this is where we would like to hear from you. This is the proposal that the staff has drafted in cooperation, speaking with the FreeBee, and as well as the past commission meetings that we've had, the multiple past commission meetings, if I may say so, that we've had on the FreeBee. So the first thing that we want to do is just invite just comments from you all. What do you think of the proposal? Is there anything that we should consider, anything we should add, anything we should subtract? So the floor is yours. If you have a question, comment, please raise your hand. I'll come to you with the microphone, and then we'll do our best to either answer your questions or jot down the suggestions.
Hi, my name is Julie Fuller. I live in Three Palms Point and I use FreeBee a lot. It's my understanding that we saved the money from PSTA that we gave them for the buses and we stopped them coming through our city on the elongated buses, and that was covered in FreeBee's cost. It was almost like 900-something thousand a year that we were given PSTA. Is that not covering the cost anymore, the FreeBee?
So the contract that we have with the PSTA was actually for the trolley buses. They were running up and down Gulf Boulevard. What you're referring to, that was the compromise that was reached with the Sunrunner so that we don't get the articulated two-piece buses, but rather the small buses. So we did have a contract with the PSTA. We still have a little bit of it left, correct? So the frequency has been substantially reduced. So yes, that reduction in the PSTA contract has substantially offset the cost to the Sunrunner. What we are looking at now in particular, and the reason that we're bringing this before the commission, just so the same thing with the Sunrunner, sorry, the same thing with the FreeBee, same thing with the noise ordinance. Most of the things that come to the commission result from input from the community, right? So the community tells us, look, we have this particular issue. Here's a problem that we have. Here's a situation that we'd like the commission to take a look at and propose solutions for it. So in the case of the FreeBee, what we have found is over the last 5 years, right, we started with one district and we had a second district and the third and fourth district. And then we kept adding to it. And the more that we added, the more popular it became, to the point where a lot of our residents are telling us, look, we're paying $550,000, $600,000 a year for FreeBee, and I can never get one, right? And so now we're looking at, okay, how can we, facilitate increased availability to the residents? The people are actually paying for it, right? This is paid for by tax dollars. And so, we want to make sure that people are paying for it, also get first chance and first opportunity to use the service. So this is why the proposal that's before all of us, this is something I proposed over a year ago, which is to provide free access to residents, or at least priority access to the residents. And this has then morphed into the current proposal, which is continued free access to residents, but a charge to non-residents of $3 in this case. And then also additionally, on top of that, we have the proposed advertising revenue. So that was something that the commission in the past has opposed. FreeBee has in their defense. They brought it to us almost every single time from day one that they proposed a contract. What the commission felt at the time that it would be just would look nicer. It would be more in line with the feel of the community, that we did not have advertising. Now, in light of, the massive expenses that we've had, from the hurricanes and everything else, it felt prudent to look at what other ways are there to offset the cost, from the freebie. So one of the ways, if we can save another $75,000 by having advertising revenue, that's certainly well worth it. And, I also happened to sit on the PSTA board, and that was one of the things that we discussed actually just last week is, how we were able to offset PSTA annual budget, by having advertising revenue. And so that's something so that's part of this proposal. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Deborah Lynn, 7200 Bocaciega Drive. First of all, real quick, congrats to Commissioner Robinson on your election. I started to run a St. Pete Beach Facebook group of almost 28,000 members. Yesterday, I shared the city's post about this meeting, including the presentation about FreeBee. I'd like to submit all these pages of overwhelmingly supportive replies from our members. It's encouraging to see the PowerPoint presentation, and as one who uses and enjoys FreeBee to go to the beach, I'm hopeful that these suggestions can come to fruition. Many thanks.
Thank you so much. Well, this is great. 20 pages of comments. You're next. Okay.
Encouragement be underway. So I've gone to a number of meetings where FreeBee is presented, and if our issue is trying to address responsiveness for residents and also costs, I think there's a number of issues that have come out at some of those meetings. And I've done some research in the meantime, and it appears that we do pay by the hour whether the units are being charged or not. So in other words, even if you're just sitting there charging and the operator, might be sleeping or resting, we're paying by the hour for all that time. So, if you could start just by trying to focus on, re-looking at the contract or going out for bid again, because I think it wasn't apparent to everyone when the original commission originally bid that we were paying for, battery powered vehicles that would have basically downtime after 7 runs up and down the beach. Now I think it's 9 runs up and down the beach. Additionally, I spent some time talking to some drivers, just as another resident here. And one of the things that they did recently to try to help address the complaints was they said, well, you know what, to be fair, always go when you're available as a driver, go to the next job that's available. And that sounded good on paper. But what they've told me is now what's happening is if they're on 75th Street and the next guy is available in Pass-A-Grille, that guy will start driving to Pass-A-Grille and he'll wave to the guy that was in Pass-A-Grille that's now spending the next 20 minutes driving up to 75th Avenue for that job. So, and it's sort of like we just need to maybe give more power back to the drivers or trust or teamwork. And it's just, everybody's trying to do the right thing. So I think that the other feedback I got was that $3 may just be what happens if 5 people get on it? Do they kick them off? Do we make sure that every individual person is paying the $3? In that case, then they should go get an Uber. And then just lastly, I don't want to hog the mic. This is an important step because in the comprehensive plan, policy 2.1.1 says, the city shall not support or finance new local transportation corridors which lie within the coastal high hazard area, although existing corridors may be maintained or improved as necessary to take the health, safety, or welfare of existing residents. So in reality, when FreeBee started being paid by residents for tourists to be, getting free rides, that in itself may have been a violation of the comprehensive plan. We're not supposed to be subsidizing non-residents to have transportation on a corridor. So this is a hotel charge or someone else is paying for it. Has to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkland. I can address, so there's a great suggestion. I can address one of your questions, and that was addressed by the FreeBee last time, which is they would have to have a credit card on file. They would have to put in how many people are riding, and they would be given a number that said, okay, if you got 3 people, it's gonna be $9. And then if more than 3 people show up, the driver has the ability to change that. I think one of the ideas that we did for around last time was maybe having a fixed maximum, whether it's $10 or something like that. So that, because at some point, you're right, I think after about $10, it becomes about the same as Uber. So that might be a suggestion that we have a conversation with the FreeBee about as well. Yes, sir.
My name's Greg Christopher. I live on 12th and Passive Grill. And a couple things. One thing is, since we're already registered, many of us, for the parking situation, parking permit, if there's a way that we wouldn't have to register twice, since the city already knows that we're residents, if those residents are already on file, would automatically be registered rather than having to resubmit proof of residency. So that would be one suggestion. Second suggestion might be that we do, like this gentleman was saying, that we maybe give the drivers a little more power of choosing the rides intelligently. The current algorithm makes it almost unusable at times. Give you an example, was going from Passive Grill to Corey Avenue, and the time said on the app that it was gonna take about 25 minutes, and there's 3 stops. Then it goes up to like 55 minutes, and there's 9 stops. Then it goes back down. And so it's free, and it's not anything I would want to use for anything mission critical, but you've got to be able to plan yourself. And I've found since going to this new algorithm that I'm paying for Ubers, which is okay. And but it is a lot more. And I think $3 or $4, maybe even $5 a person for people that are not residents is still a good deal, because to take an Uber from 12th and Passive Grill to Corey Avenue was about $13. You add a $3 to $4 tip in there, you're up to $17. So maybe putting a little more power into the driver's intelligence to maximize their rides. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jay Francis, Paso Grill. I haven't been to the other meetings, so I don't know what was discussed, but if you're charging people, don't you have to take FreeBee off of those vehicles?
As the FreeBee people explained it to us multiple times, free does not refer as to the free fare. I don't remember what the explanation was, but it wasn't free.
There's free coupons for retail.
Free coupons for retail.
If you're on there, they tell you like a free ice cream cone, you go show the app and you get a free thing at McDonald's or something.
Right. Yes.
I just want to say the same thing. I've heard the complaints from the drivers, the new algorithm. They said it's ridiculous. One driver is driving right past us to get someone when they would be on my way. I can't pick them up. I can't pick you up now because I got to go this place, even though because they drive by my house. And I'm like, why did they stop?
Right.
So that's one of the big problems right now that I'm seeing.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other feedback, questions, comments on the FreeBee? Yes.
When you do your analysis, make sure that you don't forget that if some of the larger projects move forward, I think there was a $1.25 million requirement to be paid by the trade winds. That has to go directly to FreeBee, so it would be important, to the extent that they move forward, that you include that in your analysis.
Thank you.
All right, anything else on FreeBee? Excellent. Well, with that, we'll go ahead and close the discussion on FreeBee. Thank you so much for your input. This will certainly help us quite a bit as we prepare to make the recommendations for the FreeBee going forward. So next, we'll have a staff presentation on the noise ordinance.
Good afternoon, I'm Brandon Barrett, planner with the city. A short presentation. So the city currently has noise regulations based on decibel ratings. They're 65 citywide at all times. That's the maximum. And that is the commercial, residential, institutional, and open space properties. Specifically for residential, institutional, and open space from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. that drops down to 55 decibels. 65, for reference, is about the sound of a normal conversation from 3 feet away. 55 is about the sound of moderate rainfall. We do have less use standards for measurements inside of multifamily units that vary between 45 and 50, depending on the time of the day. What was taken to the city commission about 2 months ago, what's currently proposed based on some of the feedback at the first reading, which again, the ordinance when it moves back will be at, it will go back for a first reading, is that a noise audible from 500 feet or more away from the property line if its originating source is a violation if it meets 2 criteria. The first is that the receiving property is residential. That would include condos, apartments, as well as detached single family. And the noise is generated between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. That would align with the 55 decibels that's currently in the code. So that is in addition to the existing decibel regulation. Those properties that are less than 500 feet away from the sound source would be subject to the existing regulation. There would be no change. Those properties that are 500 feet or more away from the property line of the sound source overnight, they would be subject to the new proposed audible noise regulation. During the day, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., it would be subject to the existing decibel regulations. I won't cover these maps in depth. They were in the PowerPoint, and they reflected when there was a consideration of both the 200 and the 500 foot radius, but you can see those here. This is showing rooftop decks and some of the commercial outdoor decks. There's numerous justifications for an ordinance like this. Research does show that excessive noise can cause generally health effects as well as reduction in property values. There were some exemptions that were included in the first reading of the ordinance. They are proposed to be moved forward as well. There are some items that are outside of our control, those that are federally or state regulated pertaining to aircraft. Obviously, we don't have any rail lines in our city, but those are things that are out of our control. They're preempted by the state and the federal government. Any kind of operation of well-maintained electrical and mechanical equipment, specifically generators during loss of power events, those would be exempt from this standard. There was one that was added in to address some of the recent conditional use permits that were approved by the city commission for those outdoor music operators that have sound governors on their equipment, music limited to a certain decibel level relative to the property line above ambient. Those would be exempt as well, as long as they're in compliance with those conditions, as well as any noise generated by government entities involved with emergency construction and noise generated by other sources that were exempted by the city commission, such as special events, those that are approved through resolution. So with that, we'd like to hear your comments.
Thank you, Brandon. I'll go ahead and take your questions and comments, sir.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like
Yes, sir.
to make a comment, please.
There you go.
This will be coming before the commission. Obviously, we'll have an opportunity to speak to this, but I just want to say that the context that I feel the city has presented this noise ordinance is to placate many people that don't live in the community. And I will certainly have more to say about it in the future. To say that 65 decibels is, you can only hear it 3 feet away, audibly 3 feet away. We live on an island and we're surrounded by water. And I'm not a scientist, but I can do Google. And sound is amplified over water. So I'm not going to take up the whole meeting tonight, but I do not agree with the context that this has been presented tonight. And I'll have more to say later.
Thank you, sir. All right, so you were first.
My name is David Wiley. I live on 72nd Avenue. And you know me very well from emails. Nice to meet you. Our issue, and this is more of an establishment. It's the the Toasted Monkey. Ever since they moved in, their music is just so loud at our residences. Now, the code enforcement, like 4 or 5 months after they moved in, the code enforcement came to me and they explained to me that the problem is we live in an echo zone and the surrounding area is an echo zone. So that's why the music, we can hear it inside our house. It's like we're standing right in front of the stage. Now, that's the problem. You know, the solution has always been, but nobody wants to force the Toasted Monkey to do it, it's for them to put up sound walls on the south side and the back of the building. That way the sound stays inside the building, is not traveling all over the neighborhood. And we're just praying, because it's a nightmare, stressful. You ever had a baby? My neighbor had a baby, because the music is so loud, you can hear it in the house, getting the baby to lay down and go to sleep. And you know, if you have a baby, you want him to go to sleep, right? And so it's just been a total nightmare for me and a lot of residents. And I know you've got a lot of complaints about the Toasted Monkey. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And I know that was one of the suggestions that some of the sound engineers and musicians that were at the last meeting also brought up, whether we have some kind of acoustic panels or some kind of sound insulation or some kind of sound abatement, especially the high and super low frequencies as well. So that's definitely something that we should sort of look into.
Don Francis, Paso Grove. I think looking at the ordinance, the time frames seem reasonable, 7 to 10. I don't think any business establishment can argue with that. There's no reason to have loud music beyond 10 o'clock. Decibel level, I think, should be further studied by people that know more than certainly me. And if a business establishment needs the music to be louder than that, then put up sound barriers, because quality of life matters. Might not matter to the restaurant, but it matters to residents.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I know a lot of musicians showed up on February 11th, and I think it's easy to paint a picture, especially online. I saw on social media a lot of videos. Well, which side are you on? Do you want to party all day on St. Pete Beach and all night? Or do you want it silent in a library? And I don't think any of us want either of those things. So I just want to put that out front. I live on 71st Avenue. I hear Toasted Monkey when the wind is blowing my way, but then the wind blows a different direction. I don't hear Toasted Monkey anymore, right? But I understand. And I think musicians did bring up that concept of sound barriers and working with each other. I think the big point I want to make tonight is I don't understand why we're trying to stack a new ordinance on top of an old ordinance that's not being enforced well. And enforcement seems to be an ongoing issue with this city, including with Airbnb and short-term rentals, which I joined next door, which was a nightmare, and I immediately wanted to sign off as soon as I got on that website. But it seems like the sound ordinance, it's going to affect musicians and businesses, right? But also, people are on there arguing about their neighbors, and oh yeah, that one guy that has a pool party once a year on Memorial Day, yeah, that guy. I get it, and it's frustrating, but it sounds like we need to enforce short-term rentals better too. And we're starting to conflate all these issues and put them together. So yeah, musicians and businesses show up because they're upset, because 200 feet, which was originally proposed and pulled out of thin air by the city attorney, is not a good number. That enraged people and it scared people. So to paint musicians in a light, or business owners in a light, that they're just these crazy people from across the bridge and they don't live here. It's an ecosystem in this community. And that's a big point I wanted to make, was enforcement seems to be an ongoing issue on this beach, not the current ordinance that's in place. There's also a painted picture that it's really difficult to use a decibel meter. I spent my whole weekend walking around with a decibel meter because I wanted to know. It's not hard to use. I don't know all the ins and outs of getting the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department to work with that, but they're not hard. There's online training that's only a couple hours long. I don't really understand this mystical difficulty with using a decibel meter reading. And a lot of restaurants already use them and are wanting to comply with this. Certainly there's bad actors and there's bad neighbors, But trying to fix this whole solution because we have a hammer, let's hit down the nail, doesn't do it. So we need to reflect on what's already been in place and how we can enforce that better, and we need to look at short-term rentals as well on that issue on the beach.
Thank you.
My name is Matthew Barrios. I'm a resident, homeowner, and the owner of Toasted Monkey on St. Pete Beach, as well as those in the surrounding area. One of the probably few business owners and residents in this. And I know one of the big things in this community is snowbirds. When my noise complaints go down substantially after this weekend. Referenced complaints and readings. I'm also a retired police officer, so I'm familiar with that's what it is. They're not actually that easy to operate to get an accurate reading. In the past, we've paid engineers, sound engineers, to come out and take readings. When they took readings, the decibel readings spiked higher from the music, higher than the music when cars, motorcycles, or even a boat went by and the waves crashed. So these decibel readings are extremely low. The city's been out, I can't count how many times to take readings, and we're never above. I'm not saying we haven't gone above them, and we don't. Bands don't push it. We do have a battle with that, and we're pretty, we take it pretty serious. With that said, I also know that the city's been in numerous amount of lawsuits that continue to lose money, our taxpayer money, over these things, or failed enforcement. And I just see this is just another way of going against small businesses that ultimately will lead to corporations and ultimately to Clearwater Beach as we continue to just have more enforcement, more rules, more regulations on this beach that really just burdens on small business owners. We've been through red tide, we've been through COVID, we've been through the hurricane, and we're in a constant battle with the city, as you guys all now know, going through permits for your own homes. We're lucky we have a lot of great people that work in the city, and it's a small community, so we get to actually see and interact with our local community employees. But just here to say that we try our hardest to toast the monkey, but there's a lot of people that enjoy it. Basically, one of the few places that have majority of our clientele is locals. We cater to the local community, and we care about the local community. So it's unfortunate that it does affect some people with the sound. But again, we've never been above the decibel meeting. I look at this. PowerPoint, thank you. And we look at the decibel readings, and we're talking about it's bad for people's health, but meanwhile, the decibel reading is 3 feet away from people talking. I don't really feel all that confident in those bullet points. So I appreciate everyone that's stood up for my business and other businesses, the musicians, our employees, and the residents that actually enjoy this beach the way this beach has been for 10 years that I've lived on it. I hope that it remains the same beach. Does not just continue to get bogged down with rules or regulations, and we'll again end up like Clearwater Beach on corporations, or drive the small business.
Thank you. I think we need to make sure that we stay on track here. While I appreciate opinions, well, we're really looking for suggestions, right? We're trying to get to a solution here, right? And the same way that the side that says, listen, this noise is not sustainable for us, they actually provided some suggestions and solutions. So I would like to hear from you, Mia, and from you, sir. Not right now, but maybe take a few minutes and think about it and say, okay, how can we actually help move this along, right? So, and the other thing is we need to make sure that we understand what we're talking about. Because what we've heard, and the same way that you said, God help you next door, Facebook hasn't been any better, right? With talks about we want to shut down live music. And where anywhere in this ordinance have you heard anyone talking at any point about shutting down live music? Never. Not one time, right? What we're talking about now is after 10 p.m. So are any of your establishments playing music after 10 p.m.? Are any of your live bands playing after 10 p.m.? Okay, so again, just make sure that we know what we're talking about, right? We're talking about after 5 p.m., sorry, after 10 p.m., the noise levels, right? That's what we're talking about. And we're talking about making a small change to that noise ordinance to allow code enforcement and the sheriff's office to be able to enforce it more easily, and more efficiently, and more consistently. That's what we're talking about, right? They're not, we heard you loud and clear last time. So the daytime part, we heard from our residents, we heard from people outside the community. And so that's not what we're talking about today. And so again, when we're talking about how do we address the noise that happens, at a reasonable hour in late at night, 10 p.m. All right, questions, comments?
Mr. Mayor, respectfully, most of the noise ordinance, most of the noise issues in this city are not 10 to 7 a.m. They're oftentimes late afternoon through early evening. I mean, I live in the Paso Grill community, or in El Mar, Paso Grill, and the streets roll up generally down there at 10 p.m. And noise isn't a problem down there, but it oftentimes is a problem during the day. It's oftentimes a problem at 5, 6 o'clock at night when you want to sit on your back balcony and drink a glass of wine or drink a beer or whatever, or a soda or whatever you want to do. So while I respect you greatly, Mr. Mayor, and I think it's important, and this is part of why I do not agree with what was presented here tonight, that this has an impact on people's lifestyle. And there's have to be more VRBOs. We're not just talking about businesses. We're not just talking about musicians. We're talking about people that come here temporarily and they want to party all night long. And that party may not start at 10 p.m. It very well may start at 3 p.m. or at 4 p.m. or what have you. So the only thing I'll say to the residents and to the commissioners, that be careful, because the circus may come to your block. And it may come before 10 p.m. Thank you, sir.
And I'm personally not offering any opinions tonight, so I'm simply restating what's on here and what I've heard from residents. You'll get my opinion at the commission meeting.
I have a couple suggestions. One is to find out, do we know, or does anybody in the audience know, if they're, what the OSHA standard is for compliancy? From what I've heard, it's roughly 95 dB at the last seat in the house. Have we thought about checking that to see where things are at that? Speaker placement is huge, and it's actually more is better. They need to be angled. And these are things that business owners and musicians need to do, okay? If you don't want noise ordinances and things to that effect, then you need to step up and start doing something so this doesn't happen. In-ears for musicians, so they don't have speakers facing them that are blasting at the condos behind them. Or if it's the sound mixer or other baffles, noise absorbing baffles, facing the band towards something soft instead of something hard. I was just on a show and we purchased a drum shield. That was for our mics so that we didn't get wind noise. So I know that there's things that you can do, but it's not being done. So what does it take to get it done? You tell me, because this is a community meeting. And the residents have a right to not have loud, annoying, or raucous noise after 10 p.m. And there's gotta be a way to work together and for you to be responsible for that. I mean, it's not our responsibility, the city's responsibility to, you know, place your speakers for you. We can maybe dictate where they need to be, but it's up to you to do it. It's up to business owners and musicians to, you know, be a good neighbor to the residents around you. We don't want you to leave, but I can tell you by turning down the volume, it's not gonna kill live music. This speech has been about live music, most of it has all been indoors up until the last 15, maybe 20 years. It's gone outdoors as amplified with bands. Prior to that, it was not. The most you got on outdoor music here on this beach would have been the hotels or the little beach bars with a single person playing their guitar. It wasn't bands. Now we're going into a different atmosphere. How do we work together? You know, it's definitely not slamming each other on social media. That doesn't help.
Yes.
Hey everyone, my name is Justin Rice. I live in Safety Harbor. I'm a full-time musician. I'm also a CPA. One of my considerations, I think we should approach this as kind of like a way that maybe we can find a way where residents and musicians are both better off. I don't want this to become a zero-sum game. I think that we can come to a solution that leaves us both better off. A couple suggestions I have that I don't think were stated at the February 11th meeting is that I think we should have carve-out exceptions for the big holidays like New Year's Eve and Memorial Day. It doesn't really make sense to cut off music at 10 p.m. These are huge money makers for the musicians and most importantly, I guess from a resident's perspective, for the venue owners too. Sometimes we have a really slow summer and then Labor Day can really bring us back to the green. So we could consider maybe a carve-out for holidays. And then the second one I have is that it seemed to me that a lot of people who were the most frequent complainers, I shouldn't say it that way, the people who are most concerned, were a lot of people who moved here recently. And I think that if somebody is signing a new lease or buying a new building in a building that has entertainment, I think they should be required to sign something that says, I understand there are bands playing here at 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. So whatever the ultimate rules are, I think that people who are new to St. Pete Beach should be aware that and state clearly that in their building that they do have live music so that we don't get people to say, I just moved here from New York, the band's keeping me up at 4 p.m. I'm trying to take a nap. You know, we know that there's music there and it should have been known before the purchase. So I want to keep my comments short so that other people can speak, but those are the two ideas I have. Thank you so much for having a productive conversation and thanks for listening to the musicians too.
Thank you. Is Jimmy Bees here tonight? Jimmy Bees?
Yes.
Sorry, where?
Yeah, right here.
I'm sorry. No, I mean, because you guys were here in February 11th, right? And what time does your live band stop playing?
So we moved in some.
Right? And I can tell you, I'm a mile from Jimmy Bees, and I can tell you what song you're playing on a Saturday afternoon. And it doesn't bother me. I sit outside, it's great, right? At 10 o'clock, I can't hear anything. Right? So there is a way to do it. The issue is, right, it's not about whether the residents are right, or whether the musicians are right, or whether the businesses are right. Right? Everybody has a right, you know, to the quiet enjoyment of their homes. You know, at the same time, the businesses, you know, you need to make money. And having live music is a draw for many businesses, right? It's just a matter of, okay, how do we make both things happen rather than one or the other? And that's really what we're here to discuss is how can we, again, I'm sorry to single you out, it's just, you know, you're a great example, I think, of having your cake and eating it too. Because, I mean, your band's playing until midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, whenever you guys shut down. And I've not heard a single complaint about, and you're the loudest, if I may say so. But nobody can hear you, right? So there is a way to do it. And so what we want, you know, is suggestions. Okay, how do we address, you know, this, you know, citywide, beachwide, so that, you know, our residents can have the peace and quiet that they deserve at the same time that the businesses can operate a viable business. Let's go to somebody who hasn't had a chance to speak yet. Thank you, sir. And then once we take all the newbies, we'll circle back.
Hey, everybody. My name is Justino. I'm a lifelong resident of St. Pete. I was born a few miles from here. Commissioner Robinson, I can assure you that I speak for all musicians in here, that whatever, I don't know if this is the right term, but legislation may pass, will adapt. I mean, I've been a musician my whole life here, and we've been through, the pandemic and hurricanes, but we've also been, I alone have been through gentrification where I've been pushed out of my apartments and my homes many times. And whatever the situation is, we'll adapt. Even if it's something as smaller speakers or anything like that, we'll make it work. But at the end of the day, we just want to work. It's our livelihood. People have families and kids and homes. I have a mortgage and I rely on being able to play to do that. There's still clubs here that aren't open due to the hurricanes or due to whatever. But when they are, and whatever ends up passing, I speak for every musician here that will adapt to that. As for anything before 10 p.m., Commissioner Mulholland, I apologize, but it doesn't seem like much of anything would please you. But it doesn't make sense for us.
You don't know me, sir. You don't know me.
We'll do our best to whatever. But house parties and whatnot and Verbos and Airbnbs have nothing to do with us who would be affected year round.
Do you live in St. Pete Beach, sir?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've lived here my whole life.
Have your way with me. You got the mic.
But we'll adapt. I promise you, whatever may happen, we'll adapt.
You want to keep your personal comments to the commission meetings, or can we have it on the record? Again, we want suggestions, right? What is it that you could adapt to, right? Give us suggestions on how what adjustments can we make, right? So that you can have the cake and eat it too, right? So think on that, and then you sir.
Hey, I'm Seth Campbell. I play music on the beach. I'm just going to talk about, I'm going to focus on decibel readings. There's so many things we can focus on. I know Safety Harbor is currently dealing with a mess due to their lack of defined meter language. And there's ambiguities there. I know we have the decibel readings, but like 65 decibels, things like that. So I'm not sure exactly what those are. But as far as a decibel reader goes, I know there's some people who are talking about just hearing it audibly was a problem, and there's no way to measure that. And I think they were facing an issue of how do you measure that. We use decibel readers like you would use, like if I drive 20 miles over the speed limit, use a radar gun, and then if the officer pulls me over and I say, well, I feel like I was going the speed limit. He has a radar gun to specifically measure what I'm doing. So we do have decibel readers. So you might want to write this down. This is based off of Dunedin's case. So if you want a case study, go talk to Dunedin, go search what they're doing. John Diddy spoke on that last time. He gave me some of this information. But a decibel reader should be on an A-weighted system. So write that down. That's very particular because the C-weighted systems weight and distort overall readings by means of low-end frequencies. The decibel readings need to be an average over the course of a 2-minute period. So for example, if a door opens for a second when live music is happening, the decibel reader might spike since it's isolated for a singular moment, or a motorcycle could go by and trigger that as well. So you have to do 2 minutes of a reading to be more accurate. There should also be a delineation in the times of the readings and their location. So it needs to be recorded to show the spikes, to show where it was recorded at, just like you would draw a police sketch of somebody who was playing music too loud or something. I would just say, in closing, just look at what other, I know you mentioned OSHA, I know we're trying to figure this out, but I would look at what Dunedin's doing, use it as a case study, kind of peek off of their paper and then turn in the answers to the test. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other first timers? Here we go.
Hello, my name is Amber Nicole. I'm a local musician. I live just over the Bayway in the city of St. Pete, but I've been playing music on St. Pete Beach for about 14 years now. I love this city, and I consider it to be also my home. And I'll just say I want to thank the city for being so receptive to what we have said as musicians, and to understanding that this is our livelihood, and we do deeply care about the character and the vibe of the city. And I do think that what's proposed today is much more reasonable. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other first timers?
All right.
Well, my name is Gary Seabine. I'm an acoustic consultant from Gainesville, Florida, working with Stearns and Weaver and a couple of the hotels in the area. Our firm has worked on a number of noise ordinances for small cities and towns, as well as large cities like Fort Lauderdale. And have done this over 25, 30-year period of time. So we do this for a living quite frequently. To help out, we'd offer a couple of constructive comments. Use of plainly audible sound levels for enforcing sounds. Yeah, using plainly audible noise ordinance language is actually very sophisticated in terms of the way it has to be enforced. We've learned this through a number of situations in different cities and towns, working either for clubs or for the municipalities in terms of trying to have cases resolved in mediation or litigation or enforcement actions. Having officers who shoot guns on a regular basis be the person to critically evaluate whether sound is coming from establishment A or B is actually difficult. When you mentioned OSHA before, OSHA has a time-weighted average of 90 dBA, 88 decibels over an hour period of time. And when you do time weighting, as the sound levels go up, the amount of time for your exposure gets decreased. So if you go to 95, it's cut to 4 hours. If you go to 100, it's down to 2 hours, and so on. So if you're playing real loud music, you can go over your ocean noise dose in a very short period of time, basically. So officers would actually need training, just like they need training to use a radar gun or a sound level meter to be able to critically listen, because if you're in urban environments, you have sounds over here, and you have others over here, and they're coming from the back and the sides, and it's hard to oftentimes pinpoint directionality. They need to know where zoning boundaries are and where the property lines are in the different resorts. So if you go through kind of a sequence of events, I have to go to the source of the complaint to observe sound. I've got to walk there, identify the property line. I've got to somehow measure 500 feet. In some cases, it's easy, it's a straight shot down a road. In other cases, I'm zigging and zagging around buildings, around a dumpster, around signs, fire hydrants. And so I'm using, some of them using wheels, some of them use laser pointers. And now I get the corner of a building in the way. So how do I actually measure the 500 feet? You know, it seems like it's no problem, right? I go out and I listen and everything's easy. The sound level meters are way easier. The other thing that the sound level meters give for you is something that if you use calibrated meters, if you do the measurements in accordance with ASTM, American Society of Testing and Materials, and ANSI, the American National Standards Institute standards, they're defensible in a court situation for enforcement actions. They also level the playing field in terms of how I'm going to take measurements versus the way you're going to take measurements. The big advantage that they have is that it gives business owners the ability to stand at their property line, take a reading, and say, oh, we're a little bit over, we need to do something here. Whereas if it's plainly audible at 500 feet, and 500 feet is in somebody's front yard, I'm the business owner, I actually can't go on their private property to actually self-regulate myself. I don't get that kind of constructive feedback into my ability to operate my business. So there are a lot of difficulties with this. One of the other things, your city is going to grow and change. I mean, you know, it's constantly going to grow and change. We do a lot of work where we'll actually measure ambient sound levels in communities. And for new building projects, for example, we will do computer models of, you know, it's a fancy hotel. We actually did this in Cocoa Beach. I think one of the places where you were looking at a noise ordinance precedent. And they have plainly audible standards. So we're doing this huge, big fancy hotel complex. In no way do they want to have one of their weddings interrupted by an officer showing up when they're renting a ballroom. And, you know, so they want to be sure they're going to meet the ordinance for, you know, their entertainment on the lawn, for their mechanical equipment, for their loading dock, for all the things that go with a big resort. If it's plainly audible 500 feet away, they literally we can't do this ahead of time. We can't do the studies to say, oh yeah, we know you're going to be certain to be able to meet this ordinance. If you tell us at 65 or whatever decibels there are, we can do the studies, we can design the mitigation, and they'll be sure that they're going to meet the requirements after they spend all the money to improve their property or to build a new one, which is really where you want to be if you're a business owner. And also if you're a resident, that, you know, you come to meetings like this, you build collegiality, you have the workshop, you engage all the stakeholders. This has got to be the first step because you have business owners, you have residents, you have the guys that are out. I mean, you know, we call it midnight acoustics. We go out with code enforcement officers and police officers at 12, 1, 2, 4 o'clock in the morning. And we've done this in Ybor City, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, you name it, we've been there. These guys do this every week. We do it as a tourist. We come into town for a couple of weekends or something. But, you know, they're out there on the firing line, so to speak. They've got 4 or 5 people who are standing around and looking over every little thing they're doing. I mean, it's a very difficult position to be in if you're one of the officers trying to do the enforcement work, and whether you're listening and making a judgment about it or whether you're reading the meter, you've got to be really sure with your skills. We do training for officers, for building owners, in terms of how to use meters in accordance with standards and how to buy the right meters that you can log them, that they have date and time stamps, that they have GPS coordinates on them, all the kind of stuff that's needed to anchor that to a time, to a place, to a sound. And they also motorcycle going by, whether it's a truck on the street, whether it's a car going, whatever the case may be. So these are all important points. So you'd like to be able to evaluate these first while new buildings are being built or renovations are occurring. So you have a noise ordinance now to take care of everything that's existing. And, you know, so you try to make some renovations in places that are having some difficulties or causing some disturbances. Those are easy to do. But again, a little bit of assistance from somebody like us so that after you spend the money to enclose the stage and put speakers or buy more speakers and aim them down and do the kind of things, which are all great suggestions. But as long as they're done well and the money is well invested, then people can operate and, you know, everybody's fine and residents are happy and business owners can do their work. But that part of it is also necessary because we've too often seen where recommendations were made, people spent money, they made improvements, they put in new speakers, moved the band shell around, built a little kind of shed over it and so on, and it really didn't help because of, somebody mentioned the echo of the buildings surrounding them. Well, you know, putting a band shell doesn't really help that. That's something to do with where the receiver is. So there are a lot of complex issues that really need to be dealt with. The 65 dBA that you have, we kind of took a look at some of the beach towns, small, medium-sized beach towns in Florida, and the 65 dBA that you have in your current ordinance seems to be pretty much in line with what other towns have. So that seems to be maybe not a bad place to start with. I mean, we looked at Dunedin was one, Sarasota, Bay Harbor Islands, Bal Harbor, Fernandina Beach, Amelia Island, Fort Myers Beach. I mean, you know, kind of similar, smaller towns. It's not big cities. It's not super rocking places necessarily, but, you know, just regular cities and towns. Glad to share the list if you'd like to see them so that you have that as information. But so the base level you have seems to be pretty reasonable. If it's training, if it's education, it's getting people together, residents and business owners in forums like this to kind of discuss and, you know, oh, we have a particular problem over here because oftentimes, you know, somebody mentioned 1 or 2 specific venues. Oftentimes the sound from one venue will come and it'll affect this group of houses and it won't affect anybody else. And the sounds from the other one over here goes out and it affects a few other houses a half-mile away. It becomes very localized. And so dealing with these as localized situations that require kind of fine-tuning of operations or infrastructure, as well as measurement techniques, is also worthwhile. In some of the communities we've worked with, they've suggested that, you know, if people are living in kind of older Florida houses that they don't have hurricane glass, you know, they were built a while back, typical for some number of the housing units in any Florida city or town. The residences could also, if they're sensitive to these, consider upgrades to the windows and doors in their buildings. For example, if they're in a very exposed area, and I just happen to buy a piece of property that is right across the street from half a dozen different places. And I didn't know this even though I went there, with a real, whatever the case might be. But so, you know, there's kind of a full palette of tools that you can really take advantage of to help constructively deal with this. But it's got to start with the dialogue. it's got to start also with objective information. So when we do noise ordinance related work, we call them soundscape studies. We want to meet with all the stakeholders. We want to have them tell us where to take measurements, what are the times and the locations and the areas of concern for the businesses, but also for the residents, also for the city staff, and how can we deal with this as constructively as possible? Thanks.
Thank you. I think we need to put that 3-minute shot clock back on. All right. There you go, sir.
Hi, my name is Michael Jones. I'm a resident of the beach for 20 years. I got a question because the city, this is a question for you guys, and I agree with all the things going on right now, where everybody's trying to make it work. But when we used to have like Bike Fest out here, you know, and Vince Neil, Poison, they all have way different decibels at night. Do they have to pull a special permit to do that? Or do they do?
That was one of the suggestions that we had.
Okay.
Where for special events or special conditional uses, that there would be some allowances.
Oh, because I know the
Whether
ordinance,
it's
they
like
moved
this
OCC,
suggestion on
yeah.
holidays.
So that's what I mean, like how do
If you
you?
can get Vince Neil to come back.
We could.
I mean,
Johnny Green, my promoter, passed away, we did the funeral at the half but yeah, I can figure some out, you guys.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, I'll keep it really short because a lot of people said what I was already thinking about Dunedin, with the frequency over a period of time. So a motorcycle passing by is going to affect the rating. I think that's a great idea. I understand there's residents who have even driven over to Cocoa Beach to talk to them. Let's just talk to Dunedin. They're right around the corner and it's in the same county, so it shouldn't be too difficult. And then Cocoa Beach as well. I know there's been chats with commissioners over there as well. There's a commissioner over there and she's no longer active, but she has her own band. And about a year after they brought this new noise ordinance forward, they reviewed it again to her suggestion because she was voicing her opinion against the noise ordinance and now was getting targeted repeat callers every time her band would play a venue because people were agitated by her that she didn't agree with the noise ordinance. So a big concern I have is when there actually is excessive targeted calling to a venue and it's not something reasonable and maybe even the sheriffs go, oh, this person again, you know, when that's happening, is there any sort of nuisance, I'm just kind of saying words right now, but is there any sort of ordinance or sort of rules that can be put in place so, you know, if this person keeps calling, we should cite them? If you're gonna call and complain about this venue every single night because you don't like the owner's hair color, then there should be something about that as well. So repeat targeted calling and addressing that as well.
Thank you.
I am Nick Sanders. We work with a lot of the business owners down here on the beach. And to kind of piggyback off what Mr. Seavine was talking about with the practical issues. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So there's some practical issues with using the plainly audible standard that he was referring to. How you back up 500 feet in a straight line through private property and around corners. There's also possible legal issues with the plainly audible standard.
So if I may ask you a question, because he did a very good job of 10 minutes articulating all of the nuances and challenges.
I'll be very, very quick.
Would you be able to articulate any suggestions that we could implement rather than just talking it through all the different ways we could get sued, but rather tell us, you know, what suggestions do you have to help improve this ordinance, right? Give us suggestions that can help with the residents that need help with the noise. Give us suggestions that can address some of the issues that the musicians are providing and saying, look, here's, I think, where the challenges would be. So what suggestions do you have? Because that's really what we're here to do tonight, is to listen to the suggestions and how we can improve this.
Of course, and I appreciate you guys doing that. I understand we're all trying to work together here, so this has been productive. I personally think you need to do away with the plainly. There are some issues with it. I think what you currently have in place is sufficient. A decibel standard is rock solid if you do it right. I understand I'm not an acoustical engineer. There's a lot of difficulties, but if you get the A-weighted, if you stick with what you already have, especially since the city has recently beefed up its code enforcement ordinance, I think you're in a better position to enforce what's on the books. I think if you're more targeted with different zoning areas, what you currently have is kind of a blanket. It applies to residential, I believe, which is defined as any type of single residential dwelling unit throughout the entire city. Basically, if you're in 94% of the city, if you're able to be heard from now it's 500 feet, which is great, you just violated the ordinance. So I think it needs to be kind of more tailored. the zoning, future land use, the actual use of the area, and stick with the decibel standard. I think those are my thoughts. So thank you.
Thank you. Curzon, we'll come back to you, and then, ma'am, I've got you next.
John Curzon, here on the way. Not in any particular order, but one of the things that threw me originally was there was a slide that mentioned there was an exception for government construction. So first I said, well, why only government construction? Why not all construction? Which was going to be my first, question, because obviously all construction is a concern. But then in the meeting, we said, well, we're not even concerned about daytime. In which case, if daytime is not an issue, nobody's doing construction at night. So I guess I'm a little confused about.
For example,
Sorry?
it might be road construction, it might be
Okay.
emergency work,
All right.
generators,
All right.
pumps, lift stations, and so on.
Okay.
For example, just off the top.
That was good, thank you, so now I understand. Also, we showed a map that showed 39 outdoor venues. So this has been an entertainment beach. It's not a bedroom community. It's a little different than some of the other communities. Sound travels over water. So, for instance, I can hear on 59th Street, the sounds of people on 55th Street, better than I can hear my neighbor 3 houses down on the very same street. So that's why the audible noise, element, I think, is going to be a problem versus a decibel reading that someone could read right at the location. Now, when I think about it, I watched a planning board meeting, and they were complaining because currently, I think the city has 39 different sign zones for the sign ordinance. I think 30 or 39. So one side of Gulf Boulevard could have a sandwich board that can be 2x3, and the other side could have 2x4. They have very nuanced sign ordinances. Now, they want to get rid of so many, they're cutting it down. But maybe we should have different sound zones. So, if you move right into the large resort district, or you move right next to the large resort district, it's gonna be a little different than if you're in the midst of a small bedroom, area. So maybe there could be little different expectations depending on where you're living. Conditional use. I was concerned about if we make these law changes, do they override conditional use? For instance, Corey Landings was approved at an earlier commission. Their rooftop bar has music until 11 p.m. Now, it may have expired because there's new owners there, but they got 11. I was surprised because other bars and other places only have till 10. But does conditional use take precedent or not over these laws? And then I was talking to someone who's complaining about one of the bars down near Paso Grill, which I think instigated a lot of the complaints. And I said, well, is that an issue? And they said, well, actually, if they would just live up to what was in the conditional use permit, we'd be happy. So then I'm like, well, if that's the case, we don't really have to change our law. And it goes back to what some other people are saying, that the ordinance might be okay if we could just get enforcement of the conditional use, or enforcement to make sure that people are complying with conditional use permits as written, which gets into, do people have the skills and the abilities to use these tools, and so forth. I've seen the Toasted Monkey out there with their own meters, out there on the sidewalk, just checking things when there's band changes. I've seen them try the blankets, but the sound travels. And I've been impressed when I've heard of it, and I've told this to other cities that I've been involved with, about how St. Pete Beach uses the lock boxes. The PA is in the lock box, and the musician doesn't control the music. It's controlled, and it's preset, and it's not messed with. And I think that's in some of the conditional uses. So if we go back to that method for some of these things, that stops the argument. So those are my suggestions. Oh, and also one last thing. I have friends in Manhattan who, they have high, if you're sick of noise here, imagine living in Manhattan, right? I lived in Manhattan for a bunch of years. Garbage trucks, every business has a garbage truck at different night. Constant noise. But you know what? Now they sell these things. It goes where a window curtain would go, and you just screw it in, and it's like plexiglass, and it's like soundproof. Now, I'm not saying you should go to the expense and you shouldn't be able to go outside, But there are ways to sometimes reduce the noise, to really going crazy.
Thanks, sir. David?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I grew up in Florida by the beaches. And I've lived on 72nd Avenue for a long time, long before North moved in. And I want you to know, we have nothing against the live music. Now, we're all for you, with the musicians and the bartenders, waitresses, and you have the crowds down there that, like to have fun. We're not against that one bit. We're just trying to figure out a way that we don't feel like we're sitting right inside your restaurant. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. There you go.
I live at 5396 Gulf Boulevard, which is right in the middle of the district. The major noise is from 5 to 10, actually, in our area. The major thing is tonight we've addressed bands, music. A lot of what is happening is the bands are stopping at 10 o'clock, but the party does not stop at 10 o'clock. The outdoor party continues on often to 11 and 12 o'clock. It's on the beach, it's in the outdoor areas, at hotels, restaurants, and what have you. And I think the solution is to give our law enforcement more authority to not only stop the music, but stop the noise on the beach in the outdoor areas. Thank you.
Thank you.
She's saying like, are you saying?
There are oftentimes you'll find people with giant boom boxes setting up their own soundstage on the beach.
Oh, yeah.
And again, we're talking about, it's more than just one thing, right? It's not just about outdoor music.
Is she okay with music until 10 o'clock, or is that a problem? Are you okay with the music as long as it ends at 10? Is that what you were saying?
A lot of it is that they continue after the music stops, they continue in the outdoor areas, and the noise is more destructive than the actual band.
Hi, I'm Elise Batzel. Most of you know that I usually am here on behalf of others. I own a small piece of one of the restaurants down at Paso Grill, the Dewey, which is part of the Berkeley Beach Club. And in reading this ordinance, it kind of hit me that so much of what we do on that rooftop after 10 p.m. would be violating the plainly audible standard. We don't ever get noise complaints. We have little gatherings. We have gatherings of people that laugh on the rooftop that may stay up later. It's also a hotel. But because the plainly audible standard is so restrictive, even allowing anybody on our rooftop during those times would be prohibited. I also just wanted to comment that there is a loud and raucous standard in your ordinance today, in addition to the decibels. So maybe it's looking at that two-tiered system and educating the police about the loud and raucous. So it doesn't matter if you don't hit the decibels. If the police determine that you're loud and raucous, which I think is what a lot of people are talking about, whatever the time of day is, that's already a violation. So I'd look at maybe enforcing that.
Well, that would be, wouldn't that be friendly honorable as well? I don't know
Thank you.
if it goes with it. I just wanted to add two to the list. Fran, you probably get a new sheet over there. All right. Hang on.
The paper will take the noise. Or
Put a limiter on the system right before you hit the amps.
Can you please repeat that?
Put a limiter on the system, on the PA system, right before you hit the amps. And I think some folks, or we used to have that. And then I think you missed one that I said before, which was, it's actually a more simple solution is adding more speakers. Is there more speakers? I missed it.
Smaller and more.
Well, it's adding, the strategy is adding more, like every 5 to 10 feet. Theme parks do that to control the noise. They add more speakers.
Feels like a more balanced overall sound.
Yeah, and you
That's great.
contain it to your crowd.
Yeah.
Versus having too large or a few large speakers that just blast all over the place. So
What she's getting at is if you're 5 feet from the speaker, it's gonna sound really loud. If you're standing where I'm standing, you're gonna have to crank it up much louder for me to have the same volume. Versus if you have 3 speakers between here and there, you'd be able to turn all of them down because now the actual noise level or sound level that I'm hearing would be consistent all the way around without having to account for the dissipation of the distance.
yeah, all your theme parks do it. So when they have parades and everything, if you look, they have big speakers throughout the parade. So that they don't have to blast something extremely loud and they can blast it evenly through.
I'd like to just ask a question of some of the business owners and musicians who are here, and if you don't have an answer off the top of your head, if you could just get back to us if you have some time to think about it. But one thing I'd like to know is that if, regardless of what the decibel level is, whether it's our current ordinance, decibel levels over background noise, or if it's clearly audible at 500 feet or whatever the ordinance is there a simple way for a musician or a business owner to use even if it's not very accurate, to be able to have like a decibel app on your phone and to have some guidance of what a decibel is on your property line that correlates? And so is there a way, kind of regardless of what standard we go with, is there a way for people to be able to have some confidence that whatever measures they're going to use to self-police will be adequate and will work? And then the second one is if I would love to have some feedback on, because I think there's some fantastic ideas here about mitigating the sound traveling and all those things. I'd love to know if those things are prohibitively expensive or not. And it seems to me, from a very non-educated standpoint, that many of them would not at all be prohibitively expensive. But I would like to have some actual information about that upon which to make a decision.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Madam City Manager, since you're taking notes over there's one that I've had discussions with many people over many months, including you, and it's always been considered cost prohibitive. But a lot of these issues could have been, would have been, and would be dealt with in a more localized fashion if we had our own police department. And from a budget perspective, that's kind of been like talking about cutting Social Security back. Nobody really wants to entertain it. But there's many issues that I've observed since I've been involved in what goes on in this city that at least been mitigated had we had our own police department. And that's not to discredit the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department. That's not to discredit our code enforcement, because both of those departments are very good at the specifics of what they do. But a qualified city manager directing a local citizen interested local business interested police department would go a long ways towards a lot of these issues. In fact, I would venture to say that had we had our own police department and had we had our own current city manager, that we wouldn't even be here tonight. So I'm not sure. I know it would be prohibitively expensive to stand up a police department. I know there's the possibility of maybe co-opting with another community, Treasure Island or one of the other communities to have a joint department. But I truly believe that if we did have our own police department, we likely wouldn't even be here tonight. So if we're gonna put ideas down, I hope, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Sean Kowski, Bellwether Beachcomber, so Jimmy B's bongos from a noise standpoint. So Commissioner Marriott, we just answered your question on fencing, right? We just had to replace the bongos fencing. It was 20 grand. To put that fencing up. We did that actually last year before the storm just to help and be good neighbors. So we tried that. It helped a little bit, but it's about 20 grand. Decibel readers, it's on my phone. We can use them we use them currently, although Jimmy B's and bongos aren't open. We're opening soon. So it's easy. Our managers do it every hour. It's recorded. It's added to their shift report every night. We look at that from a senior executive level and hold them accountable to that. So we're maintaining the decibel level. So it's something that's in place, and we have that done right now to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep the noise. And then obviously moving music in communities. So.
Thank you. That's very much appreciated. Yeah. I know this is a hard thing to figure out. I understand that, but I don't see a lot of people here wearing hearing aids, and I do. And there are establishments that I will go into if it's too loud. It goes through my ears and into my core that it actually hurts me. And then I have the ringing twice as much all night long. I don't know what the solution is, but I'm just telling you from the hardest hearing person, it hurts.
Thank you. Anyone else? Questions, comments, suggestions? Yeah, we're here.
So Commissioner Mulholland, you talked about getting your own police force, but I do know that in at least one jurisdiction, they have like a code enforcement officer for noise. You could, instead of trying to establish your own police force, maybe it's 2 employees that are on call and they are trained with decibel meters. They understand your ordinance rather than just the Pinellas. Anyway, it's just a thought, but maybe that's a solution.
Thank you. So expand the code enforcement after hours and on weekends? Yes.
Just want to know next step, like where do we go from here? Is there going to be a workshop where there's other engineers in the room, so we can have more fleshed out discussions about this?
Next steps are going to be to take all of these suggestions plus the ones from February and to put that together. I mean, we've already made adjustments based on that, as you saw. And then we'll have, discussions with the city attorney, the city manager, and the staff, and kind of, work through what the next steps would be. So it's not going to happen tomorrow. This is going to take a little bit of time. Yes.
What we saw today, what was proposed tonight, is that likely what will be presented for first reading?
We're going to take a look at everything that was presented tonight. We're going to take a look at everything that was presented in February. And then based on that, we're going to figure out the best way of moving forward. So I couldn't tell you what that's going to look like yet. Because again, we want to take as much time and diligence as possible to make sure that we present something that the community says, okay, this is a good product. This is something good that we can stand by, something that's going to address the needs of the community. Yes.
So I understand substantively there's a lot to talk about. I guess the schedule of it, the first reading, do you know for sure at all if we're going to be going back to a first reading, or is it possible there's going to be a second reading next, or is that still all up in the air for now?
That's going to be determined based on, we've got a couple of workshops that the commission is looking at, what the priorities are for the next quarter, for the next year, the next few years or so. And so we'll figure out, we're into that schedule. We're going to figure it. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head where that's going to be yet. Question. Mr. Mayor. What's it?
I think Elise had a fantastic suggestion on doing a night ordinance sound person. And along with that, let's add in turtle lighting. Because that's been an issue and nobody's out at night, especially on the weekends. And I think if we could combine a sound ordinance person along with the turtle lighting, I don't know how everybody, I know Trade Winds is the biggest offender of that, but there's a lot of hotels that aren't handling their turtle lighting, and that's very, very important. So I think that'd be great to combine the two, if we can afford it.
Thank you. That all falls under code enforcement. There was another.
Just to clarify, because I know this has been a point of interest, we absolutely, the next step will not be a second reading. So just let me make that clear, because I keep hearing that question. We just don't know what the next step is.
Okay, last call for questions, comments.
As a quick comment.
1 second.
Nico, I live on Sandy Beach, actually just I walked here, so. The, my only thing is there's a lot of comparisons to Safety Harbor, of course, today, and other places. Why don't we look also at what Treasure Island does? Because they party as much as we do here. How do they do it?
Well, now that CJ's is no longer there. But no, that is a valid point, which is, we're not looking at just Cocoa Beach, or not just the Navy or Palm Harbor or Safety Harbor, any others. We're looking at, how are other cities dealing with the same issues? And as much as we all like to think we're special, we are special in Sandy Beach. We do have some of the challenges that other beach towns don't have. So for example, we have 8,700 residents, right? 7,500 voters, registered voters, which means we have a very high local living population. Much more so as a per capita percentage than virtually any other beach town in Florida. Extremely high. Because of that, we have much more engaged populace than normally, right? Versus Clearwater Beach, which might be 50% or less, right? And so because of that, we do deal with issues that other towns don't deal with. That's why when you looked at that first picture that had all those heat spots, right? We're all are smack dab in between two houses or between three houses on three sides, right? So we have some very difficult challenges and nuances that other cities simply don't have. So with that, we're going to take all of this into consideration. If you do have something else that you think of between now and whatever the next step is, please feel free. The best way to do it is to email us. This will be have it on the record. If you just go to stbeach.org, left government, city commission, you can find all 5 of us on there. Feel free to email us with those suggestions so that we can start looking at that and implementing. I just want to say thank you so much to everyone for coming out. Thank you for our staff for putting this together. Thank you for the commission for being here. But really, most importantly, thank you all for being here, because I keep saying this, I know a lot of you don't believe me, but we really sincerely do appreciate hearing from them. The point of all of this is to put things in place that serve the community. Not me, not the commission, not anyone else, but the community. And so by having you all here, thank you. And for that, you can clap. Thank you.